I expected a romantic anniversary dinner, but instead a single slap across my face unleashed a terrifying force I barely knew my husband possessed. The polished wood of the table felt cool under my fingertips, a stark contrast to the nervous warmth fluttering in my stomach. It was our 5th anniversary, and Marcus, my husband, had booked a table at the Gilded Spoon, a place known more for its snobbery than its steak. He was running late, caught in a last-minute meeting he couldn't get out of. "Order a drink, my love. I'll be there before you finish it," his text had read, punctuated with a heart emoji. So I waited, smoothing down the silk of my dress, feeling a little conspicuous sitting alone at a prime table for two. That's when I first saw her, the waitress. Her name tag said Brenda, but her expression said she'd rather be anywhere else. She stalked between tables with a thunderous look, her blonde hair pulled back into a severe ponytail. When she finally got to me, she didn't greet me. She just stood there, notepad in hand, tapping a pen against it impatiently. "Just you?" she asked, her eyes flicking over my dress, my bag, my face, with a look that was somewhere between disdain and disbelief. "My husband is on his way," I said, keeping my voice even and pleasant. "I'll start with a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, please." She scribbled it down without a word and walked away. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was having a bad day. We all have them. But when she returned, she practically slammed the wineglass on the table, a little of it sloshing onto the white linen. The glass itself was cloudy, with a faint greasy smear of lipstick on the rim that wasn't mine. I waited for her to walk away before pulling a tissue from my purse and wiping it clean. I wouldn't let this woman, this stranger with a bad attitude, ruin my night. 15 minutes passed, my wine was gone. No sign of Marcus and no sign of Brenda coming to offer another. I watched her fawn over the couple at the table next to mine, laughing at the man's bad joke, topping up their water glasses with a flourish. She made a point of turning her back to me, creating a deliberate, invisible wall. The message was clear. I wasn't welcome here. The familiar heavy cloak of being the only one in a room began to settle on my shoulders. Finally, I caught the eye of a busboy and politely asked if he could send my waitress over. When Brenda arrived, her face was a mask of fury. "You have a problem?" she snapped, her voice low and venomous. "I'd just like to order another drink, please, and perhaps some bread for the table while I wait," I said, my politeness a shield. She let out a short, ugly laugh. "The bread is for paying customers who are actually ordering dinner." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating, that I couldn't afford it, that I didn't belong. My blood ran cold, then hot. All the years I'd spent working, achieving, building a life, and it could all be erased by one person's prejudice. "I'm a paying customer," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "And I will be ordering dinner as soon as my husband arrives. Now, I would like to speak to your manager." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You think you can come in here and make demands? People like you," she started, her voice rising, drawing the attention of the nearby tables. "People like me?" I challenged, standing up slowly. My chair scraped against the floor, a harsh grating sound in the suddenly quiet restaurant. "Please finish that sentence, Brenda." I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Panic, maybe, that she'd gone too far. But it was quickly replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated hate. She was cornered, and she chose to lash out. Her face twisted into a snarl. "You heard me," she spat, her voice dripping with poison. And then she did something I never could have anticipated. She drew back her hand, and with a sharp crack that echoed through the dining room, she struck me across the face. The force of it snapped my head to the side. A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. My cheeks stung, a hot, radiating shame. For a moment the world was a blur of shocked faces and muted sounds. It felt like time had stopped. All I could hear was the ringing in my own ears and the frantic thumping of my heart. And in that deafening silence, A single clear sound cut through the tension. The gentle chime of the little brass bell above the restaurant's heavy oak door. All eyes snapped to the door. It wasn't a hurried entrance. Marcus didn't do hurried. He moved with a liquid grace that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling, his custom-tailored suit hanging on his frame in a way that suggested coiled power underneath. The city's noise seemed to die down behind him as he stepped inside, his presence instantly commanding the entire room. But he wasn't alone. Two other men, dressed in equally sharp, dark suits, stepped in after him, positioning themselves on either side of the entrance. They didn't look like dinner guests. They looked like sentinels. The restaurant, which had been frozen in a tableau of shock, now held its breath for an entirely new reason. Fear, palpable and cold, began to creep into the atmosphere. Marcus's eyes, usually so full of warmth and laughter when they looked at me, swept the room in a single practiced glance before landing on me. The warmth was still there, but it was now the predatory heat of a furnace. His gaze dropped from my eyes to my cheek, where the red imprint of Brenda's hand was already beginning to bloom. I saw the shift in him. It was subtle, a slight tightening of his jaw, a stillness that fell over him that was more terrifying than any shout could ever be. The charming smile he'd been wearing when he walked in vanished, replaced by a mask of lethal calm. He walked toward me, his expensive shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. He ignored the gawking patrons, the terrified manager who was now scurrying out from a back office, and the triumphant, hateful sneer that was just beginning to falter on Brenda's face. He stopped in front of me, gently taking my chin in his hand, his thumb stroking the uninjured side of my face. His touch was feather-light. "Are you all right, my love?" he asked. His voice was a soft murmur, meant only for me, but in the dead silence of the room, everyone heard it. I could only nod, my throat tight with unshed tears of humiliation and rage. He held my gaze for another second, a silent promise passing between us, before he slowly let go. Then he turned. He didn't turn quickly or aggressively. He pivoted on his heel with a deliberate slowness, his entire focus landing on Brenda. She flinched as if he'd been the one to strike a blow. "You," he said. The word was not a question. It was an accusation, a verdict, and a sentence all in one. "Did you do this?" Brenda, still buoyed by her earlier audacity, puffed out her chest. "She was being disruptive. She was disrespecting the establishment, and I—" Marcus held up a hand, a simple, elegant gesture that cut her off instantly. "I didn't ask for your excuse," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low timbre. "I asked if you did this." The manager finally reached our table, his face slick with sweat. "Sir, I am the manager, Paul. I am so sorry for this unacceptable incident. Please, allow me to handle this. Her employment is, of course, terminated, and your meal, everything, is on the house." Marcus didn't even look at him. His eyes remained locked on Brenda, who was now beginning to look pale, the reality of her situation dawning on her. "Paul," Marcus said, his voice deceptively mild, "go back to your office. This is no longer a matter for the restaurant to handle. This is a private matter." The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked from Marcus's cold, unyielding face to the two silent statues by the door, and seemed to make a very quick, very wise calculation. He nodded jerkily and backed away. Marcus took a step closer to Brenda. She tried to take a step back, but her legs seemed to be frozen in place. He casually glanced at her name tag. "Brenda," he mused, tasting the name. He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering for a moment on the cheap, tarnished locket around her neck. He gave her a smile. It was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen. It was all teeth and no warmth, the smile of a shark before it strikes. "Brenda," he said again, his voice now a conspiratorial whisper that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. "I have a question for you. It's a simple one, so please, be honest. When you leave here tonight, where do you go?" She just stared at him, confused. He leaned in a little closer, his voice dropping even further. "I mean, where is your home, Brenda? The one place in this world you go to, lock the door, and feel completely, utterly safe?" Brenda's bravado finally shattered. Her face, which had been a mask of defiant hate, crumbled into a mess of confusion and dawning horror. "What? I don't understand," she stammered, her eyes darting around the silent restaurant as if looking for an escape route that no longer existed. The patrons weren't just watching a scene anymore, they were witnessing an execution. "It's a simple question," Marcus repeated, his voice laced with a chilling patience. "Is it a house, an apartment? Does it have a little garden? Maybe a dog that greets you at the door? I want you to picture it, Brenda. Picture that front door, that lock you turn every night, that feeling of safety you get when you're inside." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the room. "Now I want you to understand something. Because of what you did to my wife, you will never feel that safety again." A whimper escaped Brenda's lips. It was a small, pathetic sound. I'm sorry," she whispered, tears now streaming down her face, carving paths through her foundation. "I'll get fired, I know, I'm sorry." Marcus just shook his head slowly, a look of profound pity on his face. "Oh, Brenda, you still think this is about your job." He turned his head slightly, and one of the men at the door, the one with a faint, silvery scar bisecting his eyebrow, gave a near imperceptible nod. It was a confirmation. They already knew. They knew where she lived, the name of her dog, the color of her front door. They knew everything. "You didn't just slap a customer," Marcus continued, his gaze returning to her, pinning her in place. "You put your hands on my family. You chose to express your ugliness by hurting the single most important person in my world. And in my world, actions like that have consequences that go far beyond a lost paycheck." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He didn't take out cash. He removed a single crisp business card and slid it onto the table, right next to the smeared wine glass. It was thick, black cardstock, with a simple silver crest embossed on it. No name, no number. Just the crest. I knew that crest. It was the symbol of his family business, an organization that operated in the city's deepest shadows, a name whispered with fear and respect. The restaurant manager, Paul, who was watching from a distance, went visibly pale, his hand flying to his mouth as he recognized it. "You see, Brenda," Marcus said, his voice returning to a conversational tone, "I don't own restaurants. I own the people who own the restaurants. I own the silence that allows places like this to run smoothly. You didn't just insult my wife. You disturbed the peace, my peace." He straightened his tie, the picture of refined elegance once more. He looked down at her, a broken, sobbing mess on the floor of a fancy restaurant, and his expression was one of finality. "You will leave this city, tonight. You will pack one bag, and you will get on the first bus heading west, and you will not look back. If I ever hear your name in this city again, if you ever show your face here again, I promise you, the next time one of my associates finds you, they won't just be asking for your address." With that, he turned his back on her completely. He walked over to me, his face softening as he took my hand. "Come, my love," he said gently. "I believe we've lost our appetite." He guided me toward the door, his arm a protective shield around me. As we walked, a path cleared before us. No one met our eyes. The other diners stared down at their plates, suddenly fascinated by their half-eaten meals. As we reached the entrance, Marcus paused and glanced back at the manager. "Paul," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable weight of command. Send the bill for everyone's dinner tonight to my office, and the therapy bill for every employee who had to witness that display of unprofessionalism. I expect you to handle your hiring practices more carefully in the future." Paul just nodded, speechless. We stepped out into the cool night air, leaving behind a restaurant frozen in stunned silence and a woman whose life had been irrevocably dismantled in the span of 5 minutes. Marcus opened the car door for me, and as I slid in, I looked back through the large window. I saw Brenda, still on the floor, a single abandoned figure in the wreckage of her own hatred. It wasn't triumph I felt, but a profound and hollow sadness. Marcus hadn't just arrived. He had brought his entire world with him, a world of shadows and unforgiving rules, and for a moment he had let the light shine on it. All for me.